This is the Chris DeGaulle Show podcast.
Okay, guys, let's just rip. And Chris DeGaulle.
Chris DeGaulle. Chris, thanks for being with me tonight.
Chris DeGaulle.
I'm joined now by Chris DeGaulle.
Now, he puts the broad in broadband. It's Chris DeGaulle.
The Chris DeGaulle podcast is presented by USMedicalPlan.com. Save big money monthly and get better health coverage at USMedicalPlan.com.
Hey, thanks a lot for downloading the Chris DeGaulle Show podcast. I know there is a sea of podcast options out there, and so the fact that you subscribe and you make this a destination every day, from the bottom of my heart and the team that helps put this together, we owe you big. Thank you for your written reviews and your 5-star reviews at Apple Podcasts and Spotify. You help us stand out, sincerely. So thank you so much for giving this show time today. And I thank the folks at John Ruhlman's USMedicalPlan.com. John is our title sponsor. He keeps the lights on, if you will. All the sponsors that you hear on this show, I thank them profusely. I think they do great work and sell great products. I know they're going to take great care of you, and I thank you for supporting them as well. Can't do it without you. Can't do it without John Ruhlman and our sponsors in the show. John wants to save you big money on health insurance. So if you're looking for cheaper rates on health insurance, or you just think, gosh, I am spending a fortune on these premiums, is there an option? Answer, yes, there is. 877-410-4321 is the telephone number. Call him. He's got like 80 different private insurers that he can research to get you the best plan. And he does all the work. This is not some bureaucratic headache that you're going to have to negotiate yourself. John does it all and saves you potentially hundreds, maybe even thousands of dollars in premiums. If you're spending money out of pocket on your family's insurance, your employee's insurance, if you're a senior on fixed income, let John go to work and save you money and get you better coverage. 877-410-4321 or usmedicalplan.com. All of a sudden, what is with all of the celebrities declaring they're going to leave the country if Donald Trump wins? Or what a rotten SOB Donald Trump is. Like out of nowhere, this is coming. Do you get the sense that these lefty celebrities are starting to panic, Fast Eddie? Is that what this is?
It could be, Chris, yeah.
Like, is this just hysterics and panic that they see the country in total disarray? They see the Islamists and the Islamist sympathizers marching in our streets. They know the economy sucks for average working people. They know the border's wide open. They know cities are falling into criminal disrepair. I mean, did you see this story about Eric Adams, the mayor of New York City? I guess Eric Adams figures, if I'm going down, I'm going to take this party with me. That's the way Eric Adams is now cutting police, school budgets. He's asking school parents if they will step in and volunteer to be security guards and work he's asking public school parents if they'll come in and just volunteer their time. He's got to cut the budget everywhere he can. So he's laying off cops, he's laying off school staff, and he's asking people to volunteer their time. He says, because we're overrun with migrants. We can't take care of the illegals anymore and continue with basic city services. So something's got to go. This is devastating. Do you suppose that that's what this is? Barbara Streisand announcing that she's going to leave the country if Trump wins, or this Michael Rappaport guy who, I don't know what Michael Rappaport has done. There's one thing I know Michael Rappaport has done. He was in a short-lived show from David E. Kelly called Boston Public, which was sort of an interesting show to me. It was a spinoff, I think, of Boston Legal. And David E. Kelly was making all kinds of shows like this back in the, early 2000s. Michael Rappaport played a teacher, a Boston public school teacher. It was pretty good. That was back when my wife was teaching. We didn't have kids yet, and we didn't really understand the total rot that had become public school at the time. So we still bought into the propaganda that, all of these teachers were like Michelle Pfeiffer walking into, some ragtag bunch of goons and trying to teach them to read Shakespeare or something. Ain't that anymore. Yes, there's some great public school teachers, but that we all understand that system has changed. But anyway, that's the last thing I knew Michael Rappaport was in. What does he do now exactly? Serious question. I don't know.
I had to look this up myself. He's a comedian. He actually goes around and performs comedy.
Well, he sounds hilarious. Listen to how funny he sounds.
If it comes down to pig Donald Trump, and smoking Joe Biden? I'm sorry. I am sorry. Voting for pig Donald Trump is on the table. I'm sorry. I'll still call him slob Donald Trump, pig Donald Trump, and all that. But we need to get this whole situation under control.
So this is how he's letting you know things are getting dire. He's so upset. He's so mad about the state of things. He's so mad and upset about the state of the streets teeming with Islamists. I guess his assessment is the only thing to do now is to elect the enemy of his enemy. They seem like they're in a kind of a panic, Fast Eddie. I'm guessing Barbara Streisand, Jewish, is starting to realize things are getting dire here in the United States. Michael Rappaport, I don't know that he's Jewish, but he's clearly very alarmed at what he sees. And so their conclusion is, holy crap, I'm not sure the Democrats have the stuff to stop this. I think the Democrat Party might be fomenting this. This is getting so bad, and there's such anti-Semitism coursing through the veins of this country and American streets. I may have no choice but to vote for this monster. Full of expletives there, of course, that we had to bleep out. He continued.
A lot of conversations amongst my Jewish friends about the silence, the disappointment, the disappearing acts on some Doug Henning, David Blaine just disappeared, boom, in the air. A lot of people have disappeared. I'm telling you right now, we are making a list, we are checking it twice, and we already know who's been naughty or nice. See that pun? You see that pun? I'm talking about the Jewish people, but I'm also talking Christmas carols. We will not forget. We're not suckers, so when you come around asking for this, that, and the third, come around asking for money, investments, and all that stuff, I promise you, it's being discussed. We're paying attention to who's being anti-Jewish, anti-Semitic, anti-Israel, or not saying anything at all. I promise you. Yeah. We see. I'm the enigma.
No, I don't know what you are. You sound drunk. I don't know. But the point I'm playing this for you is, this guy, they're losing their minds. Celebrity culture is losing their mind. They're starting to freak out is the only conclusion that I have. They're starting to snap. You know, people like Deborah Messing. Deborah Messing, who's a lunatic celebrity herself, I guess somewhat of a celebrity, Will and Grace celebrity from like 20 years ago. It's so funny that, you know, shows that I remember pretty vividly and watching that were popular are now like 20, 25, nearly 30 years old. Friend of mine reminded me of a college moment yesterday and said, 27 years ago today, this happened. He told me yesterday in a text. I said, shut up. Go away. I don't even want to talk. Don't send me a text like that. 27 years ago college. It like in a snap. So all these people that I remember as being celebrities and stars of television shows, I forget they're like 30-year wash-ups. But nevertheless, my point is these are well-known leftists out there in social media, in celebrity, and they seem to be losing their minds, Fast Eddie. They're getting really, I guess, outright worried about the anti-Semitism they're seeing, and they don't know what to do about it, and they think it's getting so bad. People like Streisand say, I'm going to have to leave the country because I think Trump may win this thing. Is that how you read this?
It is, and Chris, you got to remember these people only consume leftist media outlets. Right. So when that poll from the New York Times came out, and then another poll came out after the week after that, I mean, this scares them. This says, oh my gosh. So instead of doing what most celebrities have done, like Jeff Bezos, and moved to Florida to get the freedom, it seems like they're either hunkered down or now panicking.
Hundreds assembling in Center City, Philadelphia last night, in front of What About Bob Casey? He's the senator from Pennsylvania, those of you listening out of state. You'd be forgiven if even in Pennsylvania you didn't know that because nobody ever sees him or hears from him. That's why I call him What About Bob Casey? He is running for re-election again next year. David McCormick, the Republican, going to take a stab at unseating him. Hopefully he's successful. What about Bob Casey confronted with many people in the streets out in front of his office. Not that he was there. Latest in a string of demonstrations urging local elected officials to support a ceasefire in the Israel-Hamas war. It was also a gesture of grief for Omar Musa, a speaker at the rally who said he was a Philadelphia resident. The prayer was a call to unite and keep speaking out against the bloodshed. Well, who started the bloodshed, sir? Musa said Casey met with Pennsylvanians whose family members had been killed in Gaza. They implored him to support a ceasefire, he said, but the senator declined to do so. A spokesperson said Casey declined comment on the demonstration, but he reaffirms his position to stand with Israel, blah, blah, blah. So these protesters are not getting a lot of these Democrats to break successfully yet, and it's really clearly getting frustrating to them. The celebrity culture is starting to get worried about the anti-Semitism. And you remember, this has been going on for a bit now. I think after October 7th, the immediate days after, I feel like we did some stories on, people like Josh Gad on social media who were completely overwhelmed at the anti-Semitism that came flooding in 24 hours after he said, this is a horror, this is a nightmare, what's happened to Israelis. And these celebrities were stunned when they made the obvious statement in solidarity with Israelis. Slaughtering 1,200 people is something we can't stomach or stand. As humans, that's outrageous, that's sad, that's shocking. These celebrities were stunned at the number of people that follow them who are virulently anti-Israeli, anti-Jewish, and anti-Semitic generally. So,
Chris, not to take you off track here, but I actually got a press release. This is something that you pointed out well early in the week, how all of this is orchestrated. Do you know how this protest was sold?
The one in Philadelphia, you mean?
Uh-huh.
No.
So this was sold this was from the Council on Islamic Relations, CAIR. They sent out a press release yesterday at 11:15 a.m., CAIR Philadelphia to join public funeral prayers for civilians killed in Gaza and demand ceasefire. They mention nothing in this press release about going to Bob Casey's office or shutting down the streets as they did. So this, as you said, as you called, these are orchestrated. These are planned.
Yeah, not organic, and it's a bit of a bait and switch too. You know, last night, you're in luck today. This is going to be a special show today. Coming up in just a little bit, you're going to hear from a guy called Uri Goldflam. Uri is stateside, traveling several states and making many stops throughout the country over the next week. He's a former Israeli Defense Forces enlistee. He's a veteran of the IDF. He also happens to be a resident of Jerusalem. He's a tour guide in Israel for groups as they come through. And last night, I was honored to MC an event where he spoke. And he gave a PowerPoint presentation that I would I mean, if I had the show and the capability to do it, I would just give him the floor and let you see the presentation he gave last night. It was wonderful. But I asked him after the presentation last night, I said, is it possible? Do you mind? Would you come on the show and let's try to shorthand in 20, 25 minutes what you shared? He said he was willing to do it. So I'm really excited to welcome him here in just a little bit to give you some perspective. But here was some perspective that I had not really realized. And I guess I knew, but I kind of put out of my mind because it's so dark. You know, Islamists, the greatest honor as an Islamist. Now, please don't confuse that with Muslim, okay? All Muslims are not Islamic terrorists. All Muslims are not Islamic extremists and supremacists. When I say Islamists, I'm very purposeful about saying Islamists because they're supremacists. They're totalitarians. They're thugs. Think Muslim Brotherhood. Think Hamas. Those are Islamists. They want total dominion, kill or be converted types, okay? That's different than just garden variety Muslim. And everybody needs to understand that difference. It's important. I think Uri would agree that my word's not his. But what you need to understand about people like Islamists in Hamas, death in a war, in a conflict like this, is honor. To kill, to slaughter Jews it's an honor. Killing young people dying in combat with Jews is like the next best thing to heaven, as far as they're concerned. Having the blood of Jews on your hands that you've slaughtered, it's like highest of high honors. And I don't think we all kind of stop and really consider the motives of Islamists. It is their faith tradition, holy war, jihad. Do we all understand what that means? When we're cheering for ceasefire, well, not we, they, when these lunatics are in the streets cheering for ceasefire, what are they cheering? If the Israelis, as you've heard it probably said before, if the Israelis laid down their arms, there would be no Israel. If Hamas laid down their arms, there would be peace. But Hamas, Islamists won't do that because they won't stop. And by the way, it's not just Jews. It's all of us. These people's design, and they are the elected representative group in Gaza, just so we're clear. They're the elected representative government of Gaza. These people believe that until all of us are either converted to Islam or killed, they got mission work to do. And if it means they die in that mission of killing or converting us, then so be it. Now, I don't know that all of these morons marching in our streets totally understand that. I don't know that we ever really stop and talk about what exactly the designs are by Hamas. This is not just a tit-for-tat land war. Does everyone get that? This is not just about Palestinian people want their own land and the Israelis want to take their land, or whatever cockamamie thing people have told themselves this is about. This is about fundamentalism. This is about religious fervor, slaughtering anyone, particularly Jews, but anyone, not just Jews, who will not convert to their way of thinking, to their religion, to their faith. And if they use, we've gone through this before, if they have to use these useful morons on the left in our country to sell their message in the short term, fine. But in the long term, they're next in line. So it was just a very eye-opening thing to really process exactly what their motives are. Uri spent some time talking about that last night. And when you hear it that way, you're like, oh, yeah, this is not. And, of course, the barbarism is just too grisly to even go into. I mean, he gave a couple of sites last night that if you want to go to some dark places, if you want to see some dark, sick, sinister excrement, there's some stuff out there online of what these barbarians did to these some 1,200 people that they didn't kidnap and take back into Gaza. But what these barbarians did, there's a recorded cell phone of one of these barbarians who had slaughtered a family and used the cell phone of a dead woman to call dad back in Gaza, dad and mom, excitedly crowing about what he'd done and the number of Jews he'd just killed. Mom, Dad, aren't you proud? And there's a whole recording of it. Mom, Dad, aren't you proud of what I did? I killed 8 Jews. Been a big day. Way to go, son. Couldn't be prouder of you, son. That's what these people teach one another. It's what they believe. And so when you see people marching in American streets, I want everybody to be very clear what they're marching to support. Not a ceasefire. They're marching to support the slaughter of Jews. They're marching to support, and I mean, Uri said it himself. I don't mean to steal his thunder. He said, I'd call these people Nazis, but I think that's an insult to the Nazis. I think the Nazis were actually more civil. These people make the Nazis look like pikers, is basically what he said. Because he said, at least, if you've seen the film Ordinary Men, he said, at least a lot of these Germans who were asked to kill Jews had a conscience and sometimes had to drink themselves to sleep just to deal with the guilt and the remorse and the horror internally of what they were doing. He said, that ain't these people. They're taught from a very young age that the blood of Jews on your hand is your ultimate reward. From birth, from childhood. That's how they're raised. So I don't think we should romanticize or entertain anymore that this is about this ceasefire language is nonsense. How do you have a ceasefire with people that want you slaughtered? How do you do it? Somebody comes in and takes out half your family. You start firing back and killing some of them, and they shout, ceasefire, ceasefire. No, if you're protecting your family, you eliminate the threat. And you don't stop till the threat's eliminated naturally. If you had 4 children and someone killed 2 of them and said they want to kill the other 2, then you take out a couple of their family members and they shout, ceasefire, ceasefire. Is that sufficient for you? Would you go, oh, well, okay, then I guess you came in and indiscriminately killed 2 of my 4 children. Now you want a ceasefire. I guess I'll trust you. And set your weaponry down? I mean, would you do that? In what universe would you do that with your own children? No, you'd eliminate the threat, naturally, which is what the Israelis are doing. They're not looking for this fight, but they will finish this. And so Uri's going to give us some more perspective. But that's all I can, I guess all I can take away from these celebrities screeching and yelling and freaking out right now that they're either going to leave the country or I think they're scared, Fast Eddie. I really think that a lot of these Jewish celebrities or Jewish adjacent celebrity types are getting really freaked out about what they're seeing in the American streets. That's my read on it.
Well, Chris, it just shows you how short-sighted they are, too, because they don't spend any time in the rest of the country. They spend time on the coasts where we're seeing all of this happen.
Yeah.
So this is their world. They have a right to be afraid. If that's where they want to live and consume all of this media from, then what can you do? Like, they haven't spent time with anybody else in the country but people like themselves.
And there are still people, though, over at the New York Times, for instance, who called Donald Trump the totalitarian. I mean, when you consider what's going on, what I just laid out, what we all understand is true, the global barbarism of Islamists, it is amazing that here domestically still, at places like the New York Times, people like Mara Gay still believe that Donald Trump is the single greatest threat to humanity and the country. And the reason this just came out yesterday too, like Barbara Streisand, I'm leaving the country. And as Michael Rappaport said, well, I hate the guy. I hate the son of a bitch, but I'm going to vote for him if I have to, because they're really starting to wig out that this guy's going to win. Did you see this judge backed off the gag order yesterday? This judge in New York who also hates Trump's guts and has just been snickering and letting the press in, ha, 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 ha. He backed off the gag order yesterday, Fast Eddie. I'm telling you, I may be reading too much into this, but it feels like something's turning here. It feels like there are a lot of people going, oh, boy, there's a Pandora's box that's been opened here that now it's starting to feel like a tide is turning for real darkness that even leftists have to acknowledge, so much so that they're either considering now aligning with or the prospect that Donald Trump could win. And it's freaking them out. And they still, which is why out of nowhere. I mean, we're still a year away from a presidential election. We haven't even had the first Republican votes yet for our nominee. And they're already out there just death spiraling about Trump. Listen to this.
Back to this point about, the GDP. I mean, I can't think of an election anywhere in America where somebody goes to the polls because they said, you know what, I'm going to vote for this guy because the GDP looks so good. Americans understand that. Republicans understand that, or they wouldn't be throwing red meat to their base.
Right.
Why don't Democrats understand that? They're starting to. And I think I have to say, too, that I think in our business, by that I mean journalism, politics, I think that too often cynicism gets mistaken for sophistication. And there is just this sense of, to your point, Joe, nobody's going to go to the polls for democracy. Nobody really cares if women don't have the right to decide what happens to their own bodies. Well, it turns out that Americans aren't as cynical as the rest of us, at least a majority of them. And that is why they're voting, because they do see Donald Trump, I believe, for who he is. They do see fascism. They are concerned about it. They want to have a better future for their children. My goddaughter is 6 years old and has fewer rights than I had 30 years ago. So yes. I think that is actually what is motivating people. People still want America to succeed as a pluralistic, multiracial democracy. That is, for, I think, the majority of voters, still the vision that animates. It's still inspiring. And I don't know that anywhere in the world has necessarily a more beautiful vision, though we haven't gotten there. Right. And why Democrats can't tell that story consistently is, I think, a constant frustration. I mean, there's a lot to be proud of. There's a lot to be concerned about. Right. But find out kind of what hits the heart, and that's what will get people to the polls.
I love what you just said.
I don't. Maybe people would listen to you if you'd stop that obnoxious up-talking. What is it with you media women who all do the Valley Girl up-talking thing? I'm very, very smart, but everything I say ends on like, I can't even listen to it after a while. It starts to sound, it's like listening to a metronome. What the hell does she mean my goddaughter is 6 years old and has fewer rights than I had 30 years ago? Does anybody press a woman on something that's stupid? What does that even mean? Can she articulate what that means? And I would just ask the Miss Sophisticated, Mara Gay, the totalitarian Donald Trump is just around the corner. What are we watching marching through our streets? What does she call this pro-Palestinian nonsense that we're watching right now? What does she call it? What is this? What does she think goes on in Gaza exactly? Who are all these people supporting Gazans? What are they supporting exactly? They're supporting Hamas as a ruling entity. And what does Hamas support, Miss Gay? You want to talk about your goddaughter having less rights than you did 30 years ago? Why don't you buy a couple of tickets to Gaza and check out that scene? What is this obsession today with Donald Trump? This week, like in the last 24, 48 hours, they're all talking about Trump, the dangers of Trump. I'm leaving if Trump wins. Things are getting so bad, I may have to vote for that monster Trump. They're losing their minds because they're scared. But they're scared of the wrong thing. Mara Gay is still pretending to be scared of conservatives. Mara Gay is still being... people like this still have the luxury of pretending that conservative Christians are her biggest worry and the biggest threat to her. She has that luxury. If she lived in Gaza, she'd wish. I assure you, she would wish that she and her 6-year-old goddaughter could hop a plane to the United States and live in Ohio. And I guarantee you the last thing she'd be worried about is whether or not her 6-year-old goddaughter could eventually abort a baby. I promise. That would be the last thing Mara Gay would be worrying about if she lived in Gaza today. All right, your finances. Yeesh. It's been tough. You've heard me talk with Steve Moore about finances and what he recommends. He said, I can't recommend. But you know who can help? My friend Jason Perrett. Jason is a financial advisor at Eagle Wealth Planning. Now, knowing Jason and knowing his passion for providing financial services to those who are looking to pursue financial independence, Jason focuses on producing consistent results for you every time. He's not reactionary. He's not knee-jerk. In fact, he'll often talk you off a cliff. If you're looking at the numbers every day and the markets every day, Jason's a very steady hand. He is a fiduciary, which means he's dedicated to providing clients with complete wealth management and investment services along with highly personalized professional assistance. Jason can help accomplished entrepreneurs, professionals, retirees, even young people who are just getting started pursue a long-term, lifelong financial independent status. Jason will regularly revisit your goals and assess your risk tolerance and strategies. He can help you anywhere you live, too, by the way. So I don't care what part of the country, what part of the world you're listening to. If you have financial issues or you're trying to figure out exactly where you should put your money, let Jason go to work for you. You can call him today, 816-394-8117. That's 816-394-8117. Jason Perrett's a financial advisor at Eagle Wealth Planning at 1717 Paddock Drive in Kearney, Missouri. You can send Jason an email if you'd like, jason@eaglewealthplanning.com. This is all linked on my website, too. You go to chrisstigall.com, and you'll see the Eagle Wealth Planning logo. Click on that, and all of Jason's information is there. Have a discussion with him about the way forward. with your finances. Security and advisory services offered through Cetera Advisors, LLC, member FINRA, SIPC, a broker-dealer and a registered investment advisor. Cetera is under separate ownership from any other named entity. Yeah, I said it yesterday in this interview. They were I was specifically talking with them about social emotional learning. This is a new thing. This is a new acronym that's instead of critical race theory, they now or diversity, equity, and inclusion, CRT, DEI, now SEL. Watch for this one, social emotional learning. It's all the same. All these three-letter things, they just keep putting new lipstick on the same pig. And to the bottom line, all you ever need to understand is all of these programs teach the same thing. White, bad. Black, victim. White, oppressor. Black, brown, minority of any kind, oppressed. You will forever be put upon and a victim in this country if you are not white, and if you are white, you are guilty of high crimes just because you were born the way you look. This is what our public education system is teaching the children of this country. And so I want you to know that when you put your children on a school bus and send him or her off for 8 hours a day, that's what they're being steeped in, whether you know it or not. And you can tell yourself, oh, Mrs. Johnson wouldn't do that. I'm not talking about Mrs. Johnson. I'm talking about in the course of an 8-hour day that you're not watching, that you don't hear about, that you don't see, that they don't tell you about, year after year after year, they get a steady diet of this. Kids are going to come home from Thanksgiving, from college on Thanksgiving, and they're going to sit around their Thanksgiving table, and they're going to spew this nonsense. The Palestinian people just want their land, that Israelis are occupiers. They're going to spew this stuff, and you're going to wonder, where the hell did it come from? Answer, our education system. That's where it came from. I put that in air quotes, by the way. I warned you yesterday that they were going to paint Elon Musk as an anti-Semite. IBM has already pulled their advertising from X, formerly Twitter. IBM announcing yesterday they're halting advertising on X following reports that their ad appeared next to pro-Nazi posts. Now, if you listened to yesterday's show, you know what I'm talking about. A guy said, I do not understand why Western Jews vote this way and vote for policies that create this, but these people coursing through American streets, cheering for Hamas, ostensibly cheering for Israel's eradication from the river to the sea, these people, many American Jews, Western Jews, voted for the very party that gave us this. So forgive me if I'm not crying tears for a lot of Western Jews who were wondering what the hell's happening. To which Elon Musk said, you speak the truth. This was spun as Elon Musk being pro-slaughter of Israelis or Jews, and that the Jews had it coming. And so, I mean, they're doing what they do. They're gaslighting as they do, and IBM, another corporate entity, does what it does and backs away. Speaking of corporate America, the United States Chief Marketing Officer, Anheuser-Busch InBev, resigning following the anti-American beer giant reporting a massive drop in their sales resulting from Dylan Mulvaney marketing crisis back in April, as you remember. That's the guy that dressed up like Audrey Hepburn in Breakfast at Tiffany's and sold the Bud Light. What a weird time we lived that I just said that sentence. Months later, the company's still feeling the pain. Anheuser-Busch announced this week that the chief brand marketing officer will be resigning at the end of the year to embark on a new chapter in his career. I bet he will. Starbucks Red Cup Day. I don't know what that is. I make my coffee right here in the office, so I don't go to Starbucks. Not as a protest, I just don't go. I don't like Starbucks coffee, Fast Eddie. It's too bitter. I just don't like it. It's harsh.
Their house blend, I agree with you. It always, and I remember this even before I was a big coffee drinker, it always tasted burnt to me. Always.
That's exactly right. Like mud. It's like drinking burnt mud or something. I've never, ever liked Starbucks coffee. And that's not even a political statement. I just don't like the taste of it.
Oh.
And the fact that they happen to be loathsome left-wing bedwetters, it doesn't make it difficult for me to avoid Starbucks. Nevertheless, apparently yesterday, thousands of Starbucks workers, and Wednesday, I guess this happened as well, have gone on strike, in case you didn't know. I won't know that because I don't go, so I won't know what I'm missing. But apparently those of you that are regular Starbucks goers, you may have noticed. Non-union Starbucks workers in New York City filed 15 complaints yesterday against the company for allegedly violating New York's Fair Work Week law. There's some big holiday cup giveaway, I guess they do. The coffee giant's highest single sales day of all time. Despite the strike, Starbucks walkouts come after several big strikes recently yielded positive results for workers. I actually read that there's one Starbucks, can't remember where, they want a break from the union. I feel like that might have even been in Philadelphia. Like there's one store that said they want the hell out of a union. They made a mistake and they're sorry they joined. Did I read that?
Yes, apparently this union thing is not good for a lot of the workers. Like a bunch of the workers are trying to peel off, yeah.
Order any size handcrafted holiday drink or fall beverage. This was yesterday, and you get the free reusable cup. Well, apparently the strike or the walkout didn't work. I guess they had a huge day in sales yesterday anyway. Nikki Haley seems to be doubling down on, I don't even know how you want to read this. Headline from The Hill, Haley cites viral bin Laden letter in call for social media reform. I didn't really get into this. Perhaps you heard about it. The Guardian, TikTok, UK Daily Mail. It started floating around on social media. Bin Laden, Osama bin Laden's infamous letter to America, which I must confess, if I knew that existed, I forgot. I don't know that I've read it. If I did, I've forgotten. I don't really care. I don't think about it. But apparently he wrote a letter to America some time ago, dated Sunday, the 24th of November, 2002. Bin Laden's words reportedly received sympathy from thousands of young TikTok users who recorded themselves expressing support for the contents of the letter, encouraging others to read it for themselves. I have seen a couple of montages of young idiots on TikTok saluting Osama bin Laden and his words. I've watched those montages. I have not read the letter, per se. But anyway, this has gone viral, is my point. All the news organizations are taking the letter down. TikTok says we're scrubbing this or trying to stamp it out. I mean, never mind. I go to CPAC and I put, a minute of Donald Trump talking about rigged elections, and TikTok kicks me off the platform. I get kicked off, literally banned from TikTok. But these young morons can celebrate Osama bin Laden at length, make him out to be a martyr, the man who orchestrated the murder of 3,000 Americans, and whatever, you get it. Nikki Haley has decided, well, I really stepped in it this week. I guess now's the time. Pivot. She goes to the Osama bin Laden letter. She said, you see, this is why I say it's so important that we know who people are out there on social media. Nikki Haley thinks this Osama bin Laden letter thing is her lifeline. This is exactly what I was talking about. This is why it's important that everybody register on social media and we know who everybody is. She's not going to be able to pull out of that one. Republican presidential candidate Nikki Haley addressing the Faith and Freedom Coalition's Road to Majority Conference. She cited a decades-old letter from Osama bin Laden. When you look at social media, I have long said that we have to ban TikTok. And if you don't know why, here's another example today. They're posting letters of Osama bin Laden's letter the week after the 9/11 attack, and it is the justification for why he did it. And so you have a lot of our kids sitting there with that and saying, oh, America deserved it. So do you agree that Nikki Haley's assessment is this is why we've got to shut down TikTok and ban social media and register everybody who uses social media because kids are sharing this and propagandizing for the Taliban? Do you believe that that's the answer? Or, again, do I need to go back to where I started and where I'm investing my time? Is the answer we need to do better educating American children as to what the hell's gone on in this country in very recent history? We need to educate American children. The indoctrination of our American children cannot embrace the words, the letters of Osama bin Laden unless they're already inclined and have been taught to think that way. They have not been taught the greatness of the country. They've not been taught the founding of the country. They've not been taught the freedoms of the country. They've not been taught the uniqueness and the specialness of this great experiment. Our fundamental human rights, our God-given natural rights, these kids have not been taught it. They don't know what makes this country special. In fact, they've been taught, as you understand, the country is rotten to the core. We're imperialists and ogres and colonialists, oppressors. And so they read something from Osama bin Laden, and it's like folklore. They go, yeah, right on. He's right. We're awful. We're rotten. And Nikki Haley says, you see, that's why we have to go after social media. Now, do you think that's going to work? I mean, the horse is out of the barn, and now we're going to run around like the preacher from Footloose and go, you kids and your TikTok. This is where I do agree a little bit with Rand Paul. Look, I understand TikTok's a danger. I understand it's Chinese influenced. I understand all those things. I do. And I'm probably willing to be a little more nuanced in this conversation than some. But I do agree with Rand Paul's assessment that if we run around shouting, you know, what we got to do is ban social media. We got to get a hold of these damn kids and their social media. I think that just completely misses the point. Like, again, that's closing the barn door after the horses are out. This is a crisis of education in this country. Banning social media, banning speech, that's banning venues. Elon Musk has proven the importance of opening up speech. You know, Elon Musk lets everybody in, but he has content contributors that say this is proven false. He lets people jump in on a tweet. And people can give it context if necessary. He often asks, he'll cite certain things on X. He'll say, is this true? Can people, I forget what they call it, not content regulating. There's a little feature now on Twitter that people can basically go in, kind of like Wikipedia. If somebody posts something, then you can go in and say, actually, what Fast Eddie posted about this isn't entirely true. Here's the truth of what he just said. And they can add more context. I forget what they call that, Fast Eddie.
Community notes.
Community notes, thank you. Yep. Elon is constantly encouraging his users on X to add community notes to people's posts. So again, it's more information, it's more speech. Community notes. That's what we need. We effectively need in this country, the adults, those of us that love the country, we need to become America's community notes. We got to get a hold of these young people and become the literal community notes in the street. We can't run around going, shut TikTok down. Like that doesn't, what's that going to do? Fundamentally, what's that going to do? Radicalize them worse. It's going to make you look like a totalitarian. Here comes Hitler in a skirt trying to shut down my social media device. That's what they'll say. So I understand and respect the dangers of TikTok. I do, but I also agree with Rand Paul. To tell millions of young people, we're taking TikTok away, I don't think that's going to play well with a group of people that are already inclined to hate the country and think that the Republican Party is worse than the Taliban. That's a brand problem, as we've discussed. They're already thinking about the Christmas shopping season at gulagamerica.com. Have you been to their website yet? I'm so proud to call these folks new sponsors to the show. They are founding Harumphers. They've been longtime sponsors. I see them from time to time posting on social media. They want to invite you to come into their store, gulagamerica.com, a great stop for patriots and conservatives this holiday season. gulagamerica.com. Now extending an offer to you if you are a listener of this show. They're going to give you 20% off your entire order between now and Christmas. They're kicking off the Christmas season early. Between now and Christmas, you'll save 20% on all your shopping if you use my promo code Chris20. So it's Chris20, Chris20, and that'll give you 20% off at gulagamerica.com once again. So it's long and short sleeve graphic T-shirts and hoodies and gosh, a whole lot more. Funny stuff too. An original Canon. They have an F-15 shirt. You know, the Husk says, "Yeah, you're gonna need an F-15 if you're gonna take me." Well, they have that shirt. Or my pronouns. I was just reading this. They have my pronouns are 9mm, 45 ACP, and 50 cal. Or my pronouns are Whiskey Tango Foxtrot. It's fantastic. They're funny. They've got a great sense of humor, a great edge, and now a great deal. 20% off all this hilarious, patriotic-themed wear, witty, irreverent stuff. GulagAmerica.com. Go to their website today, do a little shopping. I hope you will, and take advantage of that 20% off with Chris20 as your promo code. As they say, Gulag America is not our wish, but it is our warning. Check them out. Merry Christmas early from GulagAmerica.com. Enlightening and edifying individuals that I've ever heard speak on the continuing conflict between Israel and Gaza and the Palestinians. His name is Uri Goldflam, born in Jerusalem, raised in South Africa, the United States, and Israel. 30 years of experience in Israeli education, educational tourism. He works as a tour guide in Israel, a lecturer. He's an educational consultant. He also happens to be an IDF veteran. He served as a combat platoon sergeant in a paratrooper unit for 20 years. He calls the Jerusalem Mountains his home now, and he's come stateside. He's traveling all over the country to speak on this conflict with great background. And Uri, I welcome you to the show. I scooped you up last night because you did such a great presentation, which, of course, you know, in this format, you don't have your slides and your video presentation, which is wonderful. I wish everybody could have seen it, but I'm grateful you made time today because I couldn't let you escape and get back to Israel without picking your brain here on the air. Good morning.
Thank you. Good morning, Chris. Thank you very much for your kind words, and also thank you for having me on the show.
Yeah, my pleasure. I guess I'm going to shorthand what was a brilliant and informational conversation last night. The first thing I would just say, I've been talking a lot this morning and talk pretty regularly about the state of public education in this country. Our young people are woefully ignorant about history generally, civics in this country, never mind globally. And a thought occurred to me as I went home thinking about your lecture last night. What do young Israelis, what are they taught about the relationship with your neighbors? And do they understand that from a young age?
Well, that's a great question. I'll start from the second part. They do understand it from a young age. Israeli kids are very involved in what's going on around them from a very, very young age. Israeli teenagers read newspapers. Remember that Israeli teenagers know that in a short few years they'll be going into the army. It's a mandatory draft. And so they're very much aware of what's going on around them. They're very much aware of what's expected of them. And so they keep abreast of the situation. Many Israeli youngsters belong to youth movements. It's still a very, very popular thing in Israel to go to youth movements. And youth movements range from the variety of ideological backgrounds, but in any case, they're very, very involved in what's going on. As for their preparation, will take them into the military. The young ages will be taught, the regular civics curriculum and their appreciation for democracy and the democratic process as part of the core curriculum. I can tell you from my own experience, my kids, when they went to kindergarten, they're teenagers now, but I remember clearly in kindergarten when we had celebrations for Independence Day and things like that, they would come home with drawings of doves and clouds and the talk of peace and the peace discourse. And even in the culture, songs, you'll find dozens of Hebrew songs about peace. And so I think that Israelis receive an education from a very, very young age that on the one hand gives them the foundational values of seeking peace, wanting peace, striving towards peace. But on the other hand, also the knowledge that they need to be vigilant because we're surrounded with people who not necessarily think the same.
You gave the stat, correct me if I'm wrong, Uri, that some 2 million Muslims, or Arabs, I guess not necessarily Muslims, Arab non-Jews make up the population of Israel. Is that about right?
It's about, yes, it's a little bit more if you're including non-Jews. But as far as Arabs, about 20% of the Israeli population are Arab citizens of Israel. These are citizens with full rights, privileges in Israel. They vote, they're elected to parliament, they sit on the Supreme Court, they're doctors, lawyers, engineers. They're fully integrated into Israeli society and citizens of the state of Israel.
So the reason I ask that is because the maleducation of so many young people in this country, that word occupier, you've heard it 1,000 times, I know. When young idiots run around and call Israelis occupiers, or that you're somehow hostile to Muslims or non-Jews, I kind of want to tackle that culturally. I've never been to your country, but there's a peaceful coexistence amongst run-of-the-mill Muslims and Jews in Israel. Yes.
On the most part. Listen, first of all, you're invited. Anytime, Chris,
Thank you.
Let me know when you're coming. We'll make it happen. Let's start with that. The second thing, one of the largest aha moments for people who are coming to Israel for the first time is actually witnessing the diversity of Israeli society, which is something that for most people, like you said, they don't realize. I think it's a homogeneous country of Jews, like the Jews they know from across the street, and they don't really understand that Israeli society is one of the most diverse, heterogeneous communities in the world, not only of Jews and Arabs and Christians and Muslims and Circassians and Druze and many other minorities. Also among Jews, there are Jews from with a European background, the Jews from Arab countries with a background in North Africa, in Iraq. There are brown Jews and white Jews and Ethiopian Jews and Yemenite Jews. So this diversity is really apparent when you walk down the street in Israel, and that really adds to the wonderful quilt which makes Israeli society. The word that you mentioned, occupation, and this is another distinction that must be made. When we talk about occupation, this is since 1967, when Israel captured the area, which is the Judea and Samaria, the ancient Jewish heartland, which was until then controlled and occupied by Jordan. Jordan was illegally occupying the mountain area. They called it the West Bank. That's where the name comes from. As well as the Gaza Strip, which was until 67 occupied by Egypt. So occupation is not something that's new to the land, and Israel wasn't the first. And that occupation, that presence of Israel in those territories is what caused for many people to believe that that is also the root of the problem, the presence of Israel in those territories. And by the way, again, these are not the Arabs. These are the people we call Palestinians. These are not the people who are those 2 million Arab citizens of the state of Israel. So we have to make that distinction, and that's what most people don't know. When Israel was created in 1948, there was a sizable population of Arabs that was made or was accepted and became part of the state of Israel. They became Israeli citizens. There were 150 or 170,000 back then. Don't quote me on the number. I don't remember the exact number. Today, there are 2 million. So these are Israeli citizens. To contrast, when Jordan and Egypt captured Gaza and the West Bank, there were exactly 0 Jews in both those territories.
So, Uri, when we hear that word thrown around that Israelis are occupiers, here's what I take that to mean. You tell me if I'm overstating it. When I hear people say you're an occupier, I take that to mean they just don't think you have a place called Israel at all. If it were up to them, I mean, when we hear from the river to the sea, the belief is that Israel should cease to exist, that you are, in fact, occupying what they believe is theirs. Is that a correct assessment of their language?
Yeah. So, yes. So this is one of those new truths that I talked about last night, that we've been kind of fooling ourselves until now. When we talked about the occupation, and we thought that meant only the occupation of Judea and Samaria and the Gaza Strip. Some people even include the Golan Heights in that. But the formula was on the table and was true within Israel, and it's true definitely even today in the West and most of the world. We still talk about two-state solution and the Israel ending the occupation, creating a Palestinian state. And the question is, where do you draw the line? Like, where do you place the border? What we realize today, and many have before, I must admit, many have already said this clearly before, but now there's a consensus over this, is that the battle that we're fighting is not about where we draw the border, but whether we draw a border at all. Mm-hmm. It's about if Israel exists anywhere between the river and the sea. So when we see these demonstrators, when we see these young people who are demonstrating, who are so angry and so upset at the universities and on the streets, and they're shouting from the river to the sea, they're not shouting peace slogans. These aren't demonstrations to create a peaceful coexistence between Jews and Arabs in the somewhere between the river and the sea. This is a call to eradicate Jews anywhere in the river, from the river to the sea, which means that from their perspective, and here's where you're absolutely correct, from the perspective of these demonstrators, the presence of Israel anywhere in the ancient ancestral homeland of the Jews is considered occupation.
Yeah, like if
definitely true.
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt you. If you walked up to any of these people and said, "Can Israel exist? Just show me on a map where can it? Is it all right that Israel has a country? Show me where." If any of them were asked that, I'd love to hear them answer.
Exactly, but if you can get to that point of having a reasonable conversation, because sometimes you can't even get to that point. They're so locked into their anger and righteousness, and it's very difficult to actually have a rational conversation. But if you can get to the point of a rational conversation, yes, that's a question I would ask. Just show me where exactly is Israel okay to exist? Somewhere between the river and the sea.
You mentioned, Uri, last night during this conversation, the Abraham Accords under the Trump administration. That was really groundbreaking stuff. Saudis and some other more moderate Muslim countries were very, very close to normalizing relations with Israel. And you said that Iran and all of their controlling factions inside neighboring nations around Israel, they decided to step it up because that was very alarming to them. Is that about right?
Yes. The Abraham Accords cannot exaggerate the importance of the Abraham Accords. You also cannot exaggerate the magnitude and the ground-shifting events, which are the Abraham Accords, not only because Israel made peace with 4 Arab countries at once, but also that the premise of that peace is kind of completely new paradigm than anything that we thought about before. As I said before, the formula that was always on the table for peace talks was a formula of land for peace. Israel gives up land and is supposed to get the peace in return. And that was always the formula. What occurred with the Abraham Accords, and it's there in the name, the Abraham Accords, the Abrahamic faith and the descendants of Abraham, is that we had a peace for peace, a mutual recognition between Israel and Arab countries that we all belong to this land, that we all are part and parcel of the Abrahamic faith, and we can enjoy the developments and the fruits of our labor together in this land. And that's such a groundbreaking, tremendous new stage that nobody thought could happen. But thanks to Donald Trump and Jared Kushner, we were brought to this point for this major event. The Saudis were just around the corner, so none of this could have happened without the tacit agreement of Saudi Arabia. And their signs were all there. If you remember, just a few days before the October 7th attack, there were Israeli ministers, parliamentarians, and delegates in an open conference in Saudi Arabia. They were having Jewish prayers there. They built a sukkah for tabernacles, right, for the holiday of Sukkot, out in the open. So it was right there. If Israel had completed the process, then we would have had a new alliance, a powerful alliance in the Middle East, and many of the moderate Arab countries would have fallen behind the Abraham Accords, and that's what the Iranians were trying to prevent.
That's what I've been kind of driving at in my line of questioning here, Uri, is people should understand the difference. I just said this earlier. There is a difference between Islamists, Islamic supremacists, and your run-of-the-mill garden variety Muslim or moderate Arab. There is a difference, and I think it's important that we understand that what attacked Israel were terrorists, Islamist supremacists, but there are more moderate Arabs and Muslims that do desire peace and live peacefully with Israel. Yes, and maybe they're found in places like Saudi Arabia?
I think so. I think that the majority of Muslims are not of that jihadi radical variety. I think that Saudi Arabia has made steps in the last few years, dramatic and radical steps, in order to shift away from that radical Wahhabi education and to embrace a more modern, a more moderate future. And I think that they deserve a lot of respect for that. Also in Israel, like I said, the 2 million Arabs, the majority of them are Sunni Muslims. They're not the radical sort that we saw. What we have to understand, and this is what we talked about a little bit last night, is the language that we have. We don't have the tools. We don't have the language in the West to deal with the concept of jihad, of this ideology of martyrdom, of a death cult that sees the righteousness and the positive aspects of killing and dying and shedding blood in order to get to heaven, to paradise. That is a real thing. That is a real ideology. It exists in the Middle East. And by the way, the countries that suffer from it the most are the Arab countries. And 90% of the terror attacks worldwide occur in Muslim countries. You never really hear about it because the mainstream media doesn't actually care about dead Arabs or dead Muslims. They only care when Israel does it. So you don't really hear about all these things. But yes, I think that we have to make that distinction, and it's very important to create inroads with the moderate Arab countries and the moderate Arab populations. But I'll say one more thing, Chris. I think that just like in Germany back in the 1930s, the silent majority is irrelevant.
Well, that's right.
There has to be a clear call. I think there has to be a clear call to those moderate leaders and moderate populations to stand up and be counted.
You know, Christine and I, every single night, this is not made up just for an ad. Every single night we sleep on the most comfortable sheets we've owned. This is the truth. They're Giza Dream sheets from MyPillow.com. We frankly do not spend a ton of money on bedding, never really have. So the first time we ordered Giza Dream sheets, we thought, all right, well, we'll give it a whirl to go along with our great MyPillow products like the pillows themselves. That 3-foot body pillow that I sleep with is a side sleeper. I love it. These Giza Dream sheets are so unbelievably comfortable. Christine said we got to order another set so that we're never not on these things. So when we take the old off to wash, we put a new set of fresh, clean Giza Dream sheets on. They're so soft. They're so comfortable. So really, from start to finish, I sleep on the sheets overnight. I get up in the morning, dry off out of the shower with the MyPillow bath towel. These towels, these sheets, and so much more at MyPillow.com, all deeply discounted right now if you use my promo code, Chris Podcast. Chris Podcast is the promo code. Click on the radio listener square at MyPillow.com, and that's how you save 50% off the Giza Dream sheets right now. And I think a similar discount on the 6-pack bath towel set right now. Slippers, slides, so much more. The dog bed, the coffee, the pajamas. There is like a virtual online mall at MyPillow.com. And the promo code Chris Podcast is what gets you all the savings. Remember, everything at MyPillow is 60 days guaranteed to get your money back if you're not happy with it. And they're so well made there by Americans in Minnesota that they issue a 10-year warranty on the products. If for some reason they wear out or give out or don't hold up, you can get a complete and full refund. For 10 years, they warranty these products, all right? So it's MyPillow.com, promo code Chris Podcast, or call them today. Talk with their great customer service, 800-932-5056, 800-932-5056, or MyPillow.com, promo code Chris. That's exactly. Dennis Prager said on the show not too terribly long ago to me. I asked him similarly of the Palestinian people, are there moderate, peace-loving Palestinians? He said, I'm sure there are, just as you said last night. He said, but that would be like saying, I'm sure there were some very fine Germans in the 30s and 40s. That is true, but that's not who's in power. And the people that are in power are Hamas, and they're jihadis. And to your point more specifically, and this was powerful, when we see American morons in the streets, these young morons who don't know what they're talking about, pretending to grieve for, the quote, dead Palestinians, I am certain that there's been a lot of terrible, terrible, indiscriminate death of innocent people who are not involved in this conflict directly. I'm certain of that. But you make the point that in Hamas very specifically, and so many of these people that are at war and these terror strikes, it is a badge of honor. And the younger you are in death, the more they celebrate. People don't know that.
Yeah, that's one of those concepts that are so difficult to grasp, and it's so shocking to us when we do that it's almost unbelievable. And so our natural inclination is to dismiss it or ignore it. The ideology of jihad is clearly one that prefers death over life. Now, Chris, don't believe me. I mean, they're saying this in their own words. I mean, look at the Hamas charter. And I invite your listeners to open up a translation from Yale University and the Avalon Project and look up the Hamas charter and read it for themselves and see what they say in their words. This idea, this notion of paving the way to paradise through death and blood and killing of innocents and killing of infidels is a value. That's a path of righteousness. And if we don't grasp that, if we don't understand that, then we will keep falling into the same trap. When they use civilians as human shields, it's a cynical way because from their perspective, the death of their citizens is a good thing. It's a win-win. For their perspective, their kids just got to heaven. And at the same time, Israel gets clobbered in the war of public opinion because the world can't stand that. Now, don't get me wrong. It's tragic. Don't get me wrong. The death of civilians is absolutely horrific and tragic. And gosh, I wish that wasn't the case. I wish we could send an email to Hamas and just have them come out with their hands up. I mean, that would have been so awesome. But unfortunately, that's not the case, and that's not how war works.
No, these radicals. I mean, we see the pictures. I'm literally, as we talk, I see on cable news the IDF, of which you were a member of many years, a veteran now. They're showing these tunnels. These barbarians hide and plan inside hospitals. They quite literally hide amongst the infirm and the women and the children, just to goad Israel into, hit us here so that we can show the propaganda that you're indiscriminately killing women and children and sick people. It's just the worst of the worst.
I'll tell you more than that. They don't just hide behind existing hospitals. They build that infrastructure from the get-go as a military base and cover it up with a hospital. That's what they've done in the tunnels. That was they've done in the hospitals, the new hospitals. There are almost 30 hospitals all over the Gaza Strip. They're all being used as terror infrastructure. They take the fuel that we deliver to humanitarian relief to use in their generators to pump air into their tunnels. They take the food. They take the supplies. All that concrete. Have you ever wondered how much concrete was required to build an underground city? And who gave them that concrete?
Yeah.
And why was that concrete delivered? And the answer is it came because Israel allowed relief to go into Gaza to build hospitals and schools and roads and houses. And Hamas took all that concrete and built terror infrastructure underneath civilian population on purpose, just like you said, because from their perspective, and I think this is it's a small equation and but it kind of distills everything. Israel uses its rockets and its weaponry and its military to defend its civilians. Hamas uses its civilians to protect its rockets. And so you see that playing out very, very clearly. I'm very glad and I'm very thankful that the White House has come out clearly. Israel's been saying this for years, but now also there's clear corroboration. The evidence is overwhelming. The American intelligence apparatus and the White House completely stand with Israel in the fact that Hamas are using the civilian infrastructure as their terror base.
Uri, when you talk about the moderate Arab countries like Saudi Arabia, they swing a big stick on the global stage. Why are they not able to tamp down on nations like Iran, funneling and funding money to your hostile neighbors? Can some of these can Saudi Arabia flex more, or should they flex more in this?
So let me make a caveat here. When you say the word moderate and Saudi Arabia, that's not exactly what we mean by moderate in the West.
Okay.
Saudi Arabia is still not a moderate Muslim country. It might be turning towards that direction, but they still have a long way to go. And I wish them all the luck in the world. And I want to be, or as Israel, I think that what the West should encourage and support their direction in becoming a moderate country. But the rift in the Middle East is much deeper than the Arab-Israeli conflict. The Saudis are a Sunni state, the Iranians are a Shia state, and the Shias and the Sunnis in the Muslim world have a very deep rift and conflict among them. And for 75 years, Chris, 75 years, the Arab countries have been using the Palestinian issue as a leverage against Israel. They've been teaching and telling and educating their populations for almost 8 decades. That's 3 generations have grown up believing that the source of the problems in the Middle East is the presence of Israel. And that's not an easy thing to roll back.
So is that you? And I'm sorry to interrupt you, Uri, just for time. I just want to be clear. So the preeminent thought amongst most of Israel's neighbors is Israel is the problem. Is that accurate to say?
It's Israel's the problem, but I would say also Israel is just the veneer. It's the fact that it's Jews that exist as a sovereign people in the land of Israel. That's the problem.
Okay.
They don't have a problem. If you're Jewish or Christian, you can live in a Muslim country as long as you accept your place as a subjugated, as a second-class citizen. Once you start to ask for power and independence for yourself, that begins to be a problem.
Uri, I could do this. In fact, I probably should have you back, and I'll just do like a whole podcast conversation so that we can talk long form. But I would just ask briefly as we close, where would you direct those of us who really are interested in learning more? You mentioned, we got a lot of kids coming home from college who are probably going to spew a lot of nonsense. People want to arm themselves and become more educated. Do you recommend a place, a site, a book, a movie, something that we can get better boned up on what you've been talking about this morning?
Oh boy, there's a wide range. There's a whole wide range of resources. Listen, to get up to date information, news from Israel, the Times of Israel, Jerusalem Post. Those are the kinds of sources. There are also blogs, Telegram channels that you can get. Ask an Israeli friend; they'll probably direct you to a Telegram channel that you can get firsthand information. And there are a lot of books about Israel that you can acquire and read, anywhere from Yossi Klein Halevi to well, there are many others. Sure. There are many others. I'm not going to make a list.
Well,
you can try my website. On my website, actually, Chris, that's a great idea. On my website, traveltrailerisrael.com, there is a button that says resources, and on that button, there are many, many resources that you can write. My last recommendation is a small booklet that was recently written by Nat Wilf and Adi Schwartz. It's called The War of Return, a small booklet, The War of Return, which really paints a picture of the source of the problem. But again, traveltrailerisrael.com. Find my resources there. Bob's your uncle.
And one more time, Travel Trailer Israel?
Yes, traveltrailerisrael.com. It's essentially a library of videos. I have virtual tours of the country. I am a tour guide at the end of the day. People can get a virtual tour throughout the country and access to the videos, but also there's a resource button with lots of resources, books, movies, fiction that people can get updated.
Well, thank you for coming stateside. You're keeping a pretty grueling schedule while you're here traveling. You're hopping all over spots all over the map to impart your wisdom here, complete with a PowerPoint presentation last night that I was fortunate enough to get to watch. There is so much more to talk about, so much more nuance and history. Sadly, in this country, a lot of American young people don't know their history. I think, in my view, the school choice movement in this country needs to assert itself. We need to teach our young people about this history. We need to teach about anti-Semitism. We need to understand. You probably saw that Osama bin Laden's letter is now floating around on social media, and young people are saying, "Oh, that bin Laden guy. Maybe he was onto something." Isn't it sick? It's just sick, Uri.
So I think that you're right. I think there's a lot of education, there's a lot of nuance, there's a lot of history. But at the end of the day, it's very complicated, but it's also very, very simple. And I outlined that last night. At the end of the day, we have to choose in what world do we want our children and grandchildren to grow up. Do you want the world that's led by democracies, the world that values human life, that values freedom and liberties, and is prededicated on the basis of the Judeo-Christian value system? Or do you want a world led by tyrants and despots and oppressive regimes and people that believe in jihad? That's the line, Chris.
Yes.
We can go into the thick of it and dissect the woods until the trees until tomorrow, but we're missing the woods, the forest. And the forest is right there in front of us. It's those who seek life. It's those who seek freedom against those who seek to destroy it.
And
that's the equation.
I always encourage all these young American leftists who are pro-LGBTQ and trans and abortion and women's rights. I encourage them all to take a trip to Gaza and see how long their rhetoric lasts there. Right, Uri?
Well, like somebody said, there's some ideas that are so stupid only intellectuals could have thought them up.
Uri Goldflam is again traveltrailerisrael.com, his site. I'll probably reach out to you again for a longer form conversation. I know that if I ever make my way to your country, you're the guy I'm calling. I want a tour from you. Thank you, Uri, for your time today.
The Chris DeGaulle Show podcast.